I'm sitting here in my basement studio with Mike Waskosky.
Hello.
Fellow inhabitant of Colorado Springs.
Yep.
And you run a bunch of meetups, and we're going to talk a lot about what you're into, because you're doing a lot, and you have been for many years. One of the things I thought was interesting is these new books called The Ra Contact, which come from the old books, which are called The Law of One.
Originally called The Raw Material.
Okay, The Raw Material.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's called The Ra Contact. And The Law of One is just one of the main principles.
Yeah. Although they use The Law of One as the title of the series after book one. So it's generally referred to as The Law of One as the book series. But that's the principle referred to in the series.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I really want to talk about The Law of One, and they recently republished these books as The Ra Contact, and these are the books that I got. Mm-hmm. It's funny, when you initially introduced me to The Law of One, I went online and I saw some books, but then they were really old, and people were saying that they weren't really good transcriptions and all this, and so then I was like, well, maybe they'll redo it, and then like within 6 months they re-released everything.
Yeah, it's really great to have the original books had some personal material edited out, and there were some minor transcription errors, a word here and there wrong, but people have re-listened to the original audio recordings from the channeling sessions and have put together pretty much 100% accurate, with some editing to stuttering of the person asking the questions, but it's pretty much exactly what was being channeled.
Right. So these were channeling sessions. This was, I think, Carla Ruckert.
Yep, was the channeler.
She was the channeler, so she would lay down on, it was like not a bed, it was a...
Yeah, it's kind of like a bed, it's like a table.
Yeah, like a padded table.
Yeah.
And then she would cover her eyes, and there were a couple rituals along with it, but basically she got into the channeling state or meditative state, and then there were two other people in the room. Tell us who they were.
It was Don Elkins, who was originally an engineering professor who started experimenting with many esoteric things like hypnosis, and started a channeling group while he was still working at a university. Eventually moved on to live with Carl Ruckert. They were in a relationship for a time. And so their very loving energy between these three people contributed to making a great atmosphere for this channeling environment. Jim McCarty came in just interested in what they were doing. He wanted to be a part of the work they were doing, and he would transcribe the sessions after they would record them, the channeling sessions. But it's also really important. I think one of the most important things people have to know is that Carla was very strict about what she was willing to channel and how she was willing to channel. She made sure that only if an entity that was wanting to speak through her was coming in the name of love, coming in the name of Jesus Christ, coming in the name of what she identified as pure unconditional love of this highest vibration, that she was willing to allow that entity to use her as a channel.
Right. Yeah, and actually at the same time they were channeling other beings as well. Or was Carla also channeling other beings, or were other members of their sort of local group channeling beings?
Yeah, all of them were experimenting with channeling, but what they were doing was conscious channeling, and it's what a lot of people do. It's basically like waiting for something to come through you and trying to. I mean, it's a strange thing to describe, but basically you are conscious and you have control when you're conscious of what's coming out of your mouth when you're doing conscious channeling, and that's what they were familiar with. But with the Raw Contact, something unusual happened where Carla said it felt like she fell asleep. She basically left her body in this semi-aware state, and she had no idea what was actually being channeled through her. She just knew that there was this process going on, and she felt like she was in this loving space while it was happening. So it's basically called a trance state of channeling.
Okay. So Carla is laying on the padded table, and Don Elkins is the one who's basically running the session, asking the questions.
Yeah.
And then Jim is there in the room, and while the channeling's happening, I think Jim is just meditating. Is that correct?
Yeah, he's sending loving thoughts, prayers, and good energy. Yeah.
And so there were more than 100 of these channeling sessions with Ra, and Ra is the name of the being that came through Carla.
Right. And that's what distinguished this channeling from all the other channeling they had done, and probably all the other channeling I've ever heard of, is that this particular channeling with Ra seemed to be of the highest quality nature, where Don could ask extremely technical, very specific questions and get very technical, incredible, intelligent responses that were so coherent, so comprehensive that it just explains the nature of reality, explains what we're doing here. If you can understand it, some of it's really deep, and some of it you have to look up the words. They're using a lot of advanced terminology to really get accurate in explaining things. They wanted to be 100% precise in making sure we had something we could rely on as this is the way things are.
Right. Yeah, I'm about a quarter of the way through all of the sessions, and one of the words that Ra keeps using is bellicose when he's describing, I guess, average or some people, on Earth today. And that's, so I looked up, I kind of knew what bellicose meant, but I had to look it up. And of course, I don't have it up in front of me now, but it just means like a darker, negative approach or something.
Yeah, it's like a vocabulary term I remember from high school. Just more of a negative thing is basically.
Right. So, okay, so they're channeling. And so here's the thing is I've read in my life a few people or a few examples of channeling sessions and all this stuff. And I've even, I don't know, I think I've been in the room with people when they were channeling maybe once or twice in my life. Nothing major, but just people somehow getting messages. And anything I ever read or anything I ever experienced with channeling just felt a little weird to me. Like it didn't feel 100% legitimate or something. I mean, that's just a feeling I got. But I will say, reading this Ra contact, this is way different. Like, this is in another league where, like you said, the things they're talking about are so deep and specific that it just seems
it's like
authentic.
better than any science fiction you've ever read, but still it fits to everything about reality that we're experiencing, understanding, learning through whistleblowers, insiders, talking about the nature of extraterrestrials, the nature of the metaphysical dimensions and everything. So how much of this have you read so far?
I'm about a quarter of the way through. So there's 2 volumes, and I'm still reading volume 1. And last night, I just read, I think, 2 or 3 sessions, and so my next one to read is session 37. And so these were done around 1981 to 82?
To 84.
Okay, 81 to 84.
Yep.
Okay. And
106.
Okay, 106 sessions. And one of the other things is that not only does the feeling of these channeling sessions, does it feel authentic, but a lot of the information given actually agrees with and corresponds with some of the teaching I've had in the spiritual field as far as spiritual growth and levels and, not just chakras, but chakras and beyond kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like when I was doing a lot of research initially into extraterrestrials and channeling and all the different material that you find on the internet that's so hard to piece together, it was like the law of one material here finally made everything click, where I could finally get a coherent picture and see how things fit in, see where things might be disinformation, and understand, there actually is a way to fit everything together. Whereas before, it's like, do I completely ignore, certain aspects, certain religions? But this, I feel like at this point in my life, I can actually legitimately see how all religions fit together and have it really make sense for me.
Right, which is really important because rising above religion into the realm of pure spirituality that's a step in our journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
And until someone makes that step, you're sort of, I don't want to say trapped in a religion, but you're experiencing a religion.
Well, everyone thinks their religion is the pure spirituality. So it's just this matter of recognizing the contradiction between believing that other people are somehow wrong, and then the true spirituality, which sees we're all in this together. We're all a part of this one consciousness, which is trying to evolve together. Right.
Yeah. So the evolution part, I really like how in the Ra contact that, and I'm a little, I've always called it the law of one. What should I call it, Mike?
Anything you want.
Okay.
It's the Ra contact probably is a better term for it. I'm just used to calling it the law of one because that's what it's mostly being used.
Okay. Yeah, but the Ra contact is the title of the new books, and they're really well done. So one of the things I really like is that they focus on, they ask Ra a lot about spiritual progress of individual human beings.
Yeah.
Like, what's the spiritual evolutionary process, and how can a human being evolve, like even help consciously, right? I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, they were very early on try to get into specifics like, well, how do we do this healing on ourselves and others, and how do we actually rapidly accelerate our evolution? And the answers would sometimes be veiled because they're trying to preserve free will. There's many types of practices people can do to accelerate their evolution, but like they would always try to go to the heart of it and then try to be questioned on what they said to get deeper in. So they started out with exercises saying, seek the love in the moment. This is the most useful tool we have, is to look for love existing in the present moment and see the creator in others. And that's a very, we can say that we see ourselves in others as a corollary of we see the creator in others, but it's like there's many different ways of looking at these terminologies. Love, what is the creator? But these are the best words we have right now for getting to the core of things. So if you want to try to imagine, we can't be like the creator because God is greater than us. God is whatever is greater than us. Well, then we are whatever is greater than us, and we have a distorted perception of who we are right now. Mm-hmm. It's like you can always work with these principles and go further and further with seeing the creator in others, seeing the creator in yourself, and finding love in the moment.
Right. Yeah, and the ones I read last night, they stressed again forgiveness, mm-hmm. about how if you can just forgive everything and everyone, that lightens your load so much and actually removes karma. Yeah.
That's a very strong connection. It's a metaphysical law, is what they're trying to describe. Just as any physical law, they call forgiveness is the principle of breaking, whereas karma would be like if you're in like a car and you're driving down the road of some type of emotion that you have in your life. This is like something you could literally think of as a metaphysical dimensional representation of this emotion has a momentum to it, and there's an inertia behind this momentum that is causing damage in your life. And when you want to stop it, you have to forgive. You have to accept rather than try to control. And once that acceptance is fully appreciated, that vehicle in the metaphysical can stop, and you now have freedom from it.
Right. Yeah, the driving in a car with inertia and being caught up with your emotions or non-forgiveness is a really interesting way to look at it, because you're driving down a road and you're going fast and you're going to hit something or you're going to crash, and you're going to be damaged, and you might even die. But when you use forgiveness, it's the equivalent of hitting the brakes in the car and slowing down.
Right.
So then there's no more really chance of there's less chance of being damaged and being controlled by those emotions.
Right. Yeah, if we could just, and I mean, I don't know if people can even interpret the word forgiveness to mean as much as it really can mean, because acceptance of yourself, acceptance of others, acceptance of everything in your life can really make everything so much easier. It's really a core to spiritual growth, at least what they would call for people on the positive path. And that's a whole other subject.
Okay.
But there are ways to manipulate people and get more out of your experience if manipulation is your chosen path.
Right.
But in this world, in this environment, it would be very hard because people are so torn between the love that they want to feel for others and the control that they want to have in their life. And the Law of One strongly emphasizes you really do have to pick one path or the other if you want consistent benefit, to always love unconditionally, always accept and forgive, if you want this, what I would say is the more convenient path in this lifetime.
Right. All right, let's talk about the positive and the negative approach. Let's get into that a little more. But one thing I do want to say is that I'm enjoying reading this material, and for me, and I hope this is the way it is with everyone who's listening to this as well. For me, any material like this, whether it's these books or any other books, right? Whether it's the Bhagavad Gita, right? That's a great one. There are a lot of materials that I read, and I don't ever consider it like, oh, this is my new religion, and the Ra contact this is the best and only thing. Like, I absorb everything Yeah. And I sort of like in my life, I'm sort of consciously, but also subconsciously just integrating everything I'm learning.
Yeah.
And it takes time, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's some degree of, well, I like at the very beginning of the initial publication, Don Elkins said, just think of this as like research data. There's so many people who want to make conclusions, and it's very easy to jump to conclusions because it's easier. It's easier to just say, well, I've chosen this, I want to believe this, and I'm going to conclude this is the way things are. But if you look at everything you're experiencing as just kind of scientific data that now you can try to make hypotheses based off of, but it still can be thrown out if there's something that supersedes that data. But yeah, it's just one way of understanding things that is being communicated.
And I was recently listening to Joe Rogan, and he, one of his guests actually pointed out that Joe Rogan has changed his mind on some of his beliefs and his opinions. And his response was great. He's like, yeah, of course I changed my mind. Things change. Yeah. New information. Like this idea that we're supposed to pick one viewpoint and that's it that's like the definition of being stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of reasons people get attached to things. And forgiveness is one thing that heals attachments too. I think a lot of it has to do with identity. People feel better when they don't have to question the deepest aspects of their subconscious.
Right.
Like who am I and what am I doing here and why do I even do the things that I do?
Right.
It gets very, very deep. But so it's like you could assume you are a particular religion or you are a particular, or even like somebody who's a public figure would say, I have to be credible in this way. This is who I've presented myself as, and I can't touch channel material because I have to stay credible.
Right.
And that's this other category. But yeah, it's always some sense of identity, which is almost like dominating the subconscious mind of our personality and why we're, approaching the way we're approaching life. And this is why I think there's a strong emphasis in the Law of One that there is only identity. We can try to think that there's right and wrong and there's separation between us, but ultimately we are one identity. And if we, I really love the teachings of Ramana Maharshi. And in my presentation I did at Eclipse of Disclosure 2 years ago, I described the connection between some of the initial statements Ra made. They said the most important statement that they had to make was that everything is part of one original thought. And Ramana Maharshi said that everything was part of, that we're experiencing comes from an I thought, one source thought of our identity. And if we question this thought, we will continuously, remove all layers of suffering in our life, all layers of attachments. If we just keep questioning, who am I? And what is the I that's behind that is perceiving that response? What is the I that's continuously able to, be aware of the I that I thought I was? And so once you get deep enough, you recognize, well, I guess I'm not any of these things I thought I was, and I am one with the universe. And that's what all these, great gurus and saints have seemed to be saying.
Right. That's great. Yeah. Yeah. And I remember from listening to some psychologists and probably Jordan B. Peterson and others that the reason that a human being sort of gets stuck into one line of thinking is that it's expedient. Yeah. So they go back to like when we were living in the forest and when you hear a noise behind you, you jump because it might be, a bear that's about to eat you. So, it would be nice if you could just calmly turn around and say, okay, let me observe this noise. What is it? But, just to survive, you kind of have to just go and you have to just run. So that's they're like little emotional shortcuts we have because in our daily life, we don't have the brain power and energy to actually look at every small decision and really think deeply about it.
Yeah, it's patterns that go back to our childhood. All these subconscious things that we program ourselves with. And boy, it's a really tough tangled mess to try to figure out why you are the way you are. But with meditation, you can get there. And there's obviously strong emphasis on meditation in the Law of One, that this is the way that we can look deeper into the roots of the tree of mind. It's like our mind is constantly out on these outer surface layers of this giant tree of what our mind represents. It's not like we're one thing inside of our mind. We're this tangle, what they call a mind-body-spirit complex. They don't refer to us as people. They refer to us as a complex of these energies that are manifested as mind, body, and spirit. But yeah, the mind is so full of stuff by the time we're our age that you got to spend a lot of time in meditation to work on it.
Right. Yeah, and that's another reason why people stick with religion too, is because then they don't have to think about it. Yeah. And they can think about other things in their life. So, see, religion to me always seemed like a phase or a process, and it's a good one. It's not a bad thing that people are in religion.
Yeah.
Like, I used to think that when I was really, really young, like when I was 17 or even earlier, when I stopped going to church and all that. Like, I used to think religion was bad and it was brainwashing people. But when I grew older, I realized that it's just a step. It's a phase in the evolution.
Yeah.
Not bad.
It's a resource. It's a tool, whether or not people want to look at it that way. I enjoy going to church. I enjoy the worship experience. I don't get that when I'm at home alone. So there's a lot that you can gain. And everything is catalyst in the law of one. Everything works as what catalyst is defined as that which leads to experience. And everything we're here for is based in experience. Experience is what leads to, they talk about archetypes of evolution. Experience leads to, it's an essential component to lead to a transformation of any kind. You have to be able to process experience. And to have experience, you have to have catalyst. So to have a very finely tuned experience that leads to the right kind of transformation, you might need the right kind of catalyst. And that might be religion. That might be something like this podcast. That might be a lot of things.
Right. Yeah, and I just read last night that we're provided with these experiences to help work through our karma, and if we handle that experience properly, then we sort of get rid of the karma. Not get rid of. What's the word? We dissolve our karma.
Yeah.
But if you get the same situation, the same experience, and you handle it wrongly, then later on in your life, you're going to be presented with the same thing again until you get it right.
It's catalyst gone awry. It's not that you're using it wrongly. You're just creating a new experience.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And so the goal with the catalyst is to use the catalyst to what? Turn back toward love.
Yeah, to its fullest intention. And every catalyst might have a different potential. And we might need specific even negative things. People don't even realize that, like, all the negative stuff going on in your life, all the frustrations, all this is super important specifically for you. If you're experiencing that, it's because it was put there in your path because that was going to be most beneficial for you to potentially understand, oh, wow, this is something I can work on. This is something I should work on. I can heal this. I can forgive this.
Right.
I forgot your question.
Yeah, no, that was it. It's like, how do we handle the catalyst to move on? And just turning toward love or helping others, or just acceptance and forgiveness. Like, that happens to me a lot. Like, something negative will happen and it'll bother me. And I'll be like, man, why did this have to happen? Like, that's how you feel. And then sometimes, I don't know how often, what percentage, but sometimes I will actually think to myself, all right, this is what it is. And you know what? It's okay. And then I feel way better.
Yeah. 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 And what's so interesting, they say in the law of one that which is not needed falls away. The goal, our purpose here, we can experience everything desired. That's what we're supposed to do, experience everything desired. And if we try to push away something like, oh, that's not right for me, but you still want it, you're going to keep getting it back. But they say experience everything that you desire, distilling from it the love and light within it. That which is not needed falls away. And what was I saying just now? That when that which is not needed falls away, you don't have to go through it anymore. So once you've done your forgiving, you've done that work, the universe actually does realign. And this is so trippy that, like, we're so, thinking about everything in terms of determinism and like, well, all these things are happening to me for these other reasons. But it's actually all coming from these metaphysical planes where the nature of the events that are taking place, not the objects, but the events as they're being aligned in our life, are there so that what we're needing can come back. But when it's not needed anymore, it won't come back. So if you're really annoyed that something keeps happening, just become completely peaceful with it, become completely accepting, completely loving, and just find a way to find joy. There you are again. I love you. And then it won't have to happen anymore. That's really how it works.
Right. Yeah. Living that out practically is sometimes not easy.
Yeah.
Experiencing some situations. I mean, I almost think that like the more negative situations, like if it's a family member who maybe they get a terminal disease and they're going to die, or maybe they do die.
Oh yeah.
Like I don't know. This has always been weird with me. The big stuff like that, I seem to handle okay. Mm-hmm. Like maybe even I handle it well. But it's the little things in my life. It's like when I'm on hold for customer service and then someone comes back and I have to talk to 3 different people in 20 minutes and tell them all the same story. Like for me, it's those little things that really grate me. And so it's tricky. Like, what do I do then? Am I just supposed to sort of be all zen when I'm on the phone with customer service? Like, it's not easy.
I'm going to go in a direction you might not expect. But I love to go in this direction. We are mind, body, spirits. We're a complex of 3 systems that are different. And if you're not taking care of your body in every way possible. So for example, like when we get stressed, we have extra chemicals running through us that make it harder to come back to a Zen-like state. And like I love certain herbs. There's been a lot of herbs I've taken for stress during work situations, ashwagandha, skullcap, even ginseng, and some of these teas you've got here probably are good for it. Yeah, there's so many different types of ways that you can tweak your mind just a little, tweak your brain just a little bit so that stress doesn't get to you as much. And that can help you get to a point of forgiveness a little bit easier, I think, and when you're in that space during the day. It is always about getting to that space of forgiveness, I think, and not having to deal with the frustrations. But I feel like it's a very complicated game that we're in. There's many layers to it. And all the choices that we make are connected to the experience that we wind up having in the moment. And that does relate to diet. It relates to if you meditated the night before or something like that. It relates to if you've been, generally having a problem and that you haven't been dealing with in your life. Is your desk clean? I like that you got a clean desk here. It's like that's all connected.
Well, that desk is clean, but if you turned around right now,
oh yeah,
my
that
God.
One's not.
Yeah, and so as you were talking, I was thinking that one of the reasons, like this example with the customer service representatives is good, because the reason it frustrates me is because I have other stuff to do.
Oh yeah,
like if that's the only thing if I had 8 hours in the day to do that one thing,
yeah,
I wouldn't care. I'd be like, okay, hold on. I'd be laying on the couch on the phone, right?
Yeah.
But it's like when our lives can become complicated and there can be pressures and we're expectancy from other people.
Yeah.
So that's why I've gone through these phases in my life where I simplify. Mm-hmm. And I will literally look at what I'm doing in my life and I will chop off like a third of it and just say, I just can't do that.
Yeah.
And I'm about to do that again right now in my life. So it's exciting.
Oh, you already chopped off the podcast here. You got to get it back going.
That's true. Well, this is a really great start. So I said we were going to talk about the positive and the negative path.
Yeah, there's a lot we can talk about.
Yeah.
We can talk about the densities of evolution. There's so many different things in the law of one. It's so big.
Well, the densities of evolution, let's talk about that. But which one do you want to talk about first?
Well, the density of evolution could easily lead into a balanced discussion of the positive and negative understanding, because ultimately, we're not talking about good and bad when we talk about positive and negative. We're talking about like how a magnet has a positive and negative polarity. And the 2 polarities will repel or attract based on how you're orienting them. And this is just a natural principle of the metaphysics of the universe that came from a lot of experimentation of apparently the intelligence of galaxies. This is a huge, huge discussion. But I think one of the most interesting things for me is the way that we're learning about the geometric nature of the universe, that even like if you have a piano, there'll be 8 white keys. And if you want to, tune a piano, it has to be closely in tune so that those 8 keys sound right. And this is just like a universal principle that all of vibration has these specific stepping points where it was going to sound good. This is just the way consciousness has manifested our reality. It's based on these kind of intervals, you could say, of vibration. And what Ra describes all of the universe that we're in is the one being, one consciousness manifested, but there are different densities to it. People use the word dimension a lot, and I think they use the word densities to be more clear. That when, for example, like rocks would be first density, the air around us is first density consciousness. It's actually conscious. Crystals are conscious. But second density of consciousness would be plants and animal, or anything like bacteria, anything that's not like human level intelligence. But plants and animals apparently are not self-aware yet. They're in the growth phase, but there's still a greater density of consciousness that they can begin to appreciate some of the ideas of what reality is. It's about identity. So once they become self-aware, are in that point, then they graduate into third density, which is what humans on Earth right now are representing, as we are transitioning to fourth density. And third density is all about choice. We have to choose love. We have to open up our energy centers. That's another topic. But when we can open our heart center, we can become capable of inhabiting a fourth density body, where that love energy becomes the nature of all of what we're doing. And you can choose in this density if you want to pursue primarily love of self or primarily love of others. More than 51%, and people, have made fun of this percentage thing, but it's really about, can you keep your heart open? That's where it comes down to. And so this is a whole complicated discussion about the nature of what's going to be happening to us on Earth to bring us to the fourth density. But it's ultimately what I believe has been prophesied in many ancient religions, that we're going to a new Earth. It's going to be a lot better. And we're going to have probably upgraded bodies, upgraded genetics. And it could be a natural function that genetics just naturally are upgraded by the light coming in through the sun or something. But in the fourth density bodies, we will be telepathic. We will have a shared group consciousness much more than we do now. Not like the Borg, but just like, oh yeah, hi there. We don't have to say it out loud. We can just know it.
Right.
And the fourth density is seeking the laws of light. And it takes a long time, maybe millions of years in fourth density. And then eventually you reach a point of being able to manifest much more with thought alone. And in the fifth density, apparently beings begin to be able to actually choose the kind of physical form they want. It's not so much of a process of exploring love and service as it is exploring the wisdom that would refine all of that energy that you've now developed as a consciousness. And a lot of people on Earth right now are what the Law of One calls wanderers. They're souls who came from fourth, fifth, and sixth density experiences to kind of lower their vibration, lower their experience in a more narrowed way in order to be of service. So it's not that everyone here on the planet is trying to go from third to fourth density. A lot of advanced souls are just learning lessons through being of service here and trying to raise the vibration to help other people achieve fourth density consciousness. But the fifth density that works with the laws of light eventually graduates into the sixth density, which is learning the laws of one, the law of one, basically, which is also a process of understanding how wisdom and love can best be fit together for the greatest optimal evolution back into the one, the understanding of the one. So that's a very fundamental principle, that Ra is of the sixth density, and that's where they're coming from, whereas most channels identify with the fourth or the fifth density, trying to teach strong lessons about love, strong lessons about wisdom and light. Light is being synonymous with wisdom in a lot of what they talk about. And the seventh density, Ra hasn't attained yet, but this is the last density before the reunion of all identity into one mind of the Creator. And the seventh density is where you learn the laws of timelessness. The laws of timelessness, where I can't even speculate, and Ra even has a hard time, but I would imagine all of time is then seen as one. All timelines. A lot of people today can easily say, oh yeah, time doesn't exist, it's an illusion. But we're still in it all the time, experiencing it. We haven't seen all of time as one thing, one reciprocation of one experience, one moment, which is apparently what facilitates the final appreciation of all as one. Mm. And then there are future universes. There was previous universes. There's just octaves. On a piano, you continue to have octaves higher and lower.
Right.
And those other universes, Ra knows very little about, but they do know a little bit, and they know that there are beings who come from the future universe back into this one, and they don't give much detail, but that could even dovetail into what Corey Good has described, which is very fascinating. We have this person who claims that he's being contacted by Ra, and there is a strong association with blue spheres that have been kind of facilitating a balanced, buffered energy for our progression into fourth density, so people don't go crazy as the sun is super juiced with new energy. But that's one example, I would say, of what I believe it would be an example of beings from the next universe who needed to kind of like tweak things, as though there's maybe some coalescence of all the universes that's taking place on some grander scale that we can barely even appreciate. That's a whole other. Yeah, that's a big thing.
That makes sense. And so the 7 densities, like you said, it's an octave. So when you start out here on Earth, let's say in first density, and then you graduate to second and third, and then once you're in 7th, once you graduate from 7th, you go to the 8th, but the 8th is really the first level of the next octave.
Right.
Okay. And so now graduating from one density to another, I guess it's different for every density, what you have to attain or become.
Right, be ready for. And it's also represented by the chakras, the energy centers. They call chakras energy centers, although they clarified this is the same thing as chakras. But that word is very loaded with many concepts that probably are not totally accurate to what they are intending. But basically, the first chakra is survival. So this is basically the nature of the first density consciousness too, is basically just appreciating survival.
Got it.
Just getting to the point of becoming a life form that can do things is the second density then, which the
orange.
The orange chakra. What's the sacral chakra? And this relates to personal identity, relates to and we can have blockages when we are thinking very badly about ourselves or something, or very distorted perception of ourselves. We can have blockages in the orange chakra. And this is what animals go through, just trying to figure out what am I, what's going on here. And then the third density corresponds to the yellow, the solar plexus around the stomach. And this deals with social relations. Ra even said that when we would negatively use the term ego, saying you have an ego, that relates to blockages of the yellow chakra. So that's where a lot of our forgiveness work right now is needing to unblock the stuff going on in the yellow chakra. But when we can activate the heart chakra, then we can live in this magical world of love where things go much more smoothly, and we get ready much more powerfully is a good word for it too. When we keep our hearts open, we have more power. We have more ability to do more in this lifetime. And it's almost too much to talk about the higher chakras because that's esoteric stuff that's I don't even fully understand.
Right.
I think if people can get their hearts open a lot of the time, and the energy flows upwards. So if you're blocked at one chakra level, the amount of opening you can have of a higher chakra is limited by that blockage down below.
Right.
So working from the bottom up is the most important thing. So seeing things in terms of survival, if you're stuck, not being able to even, pay for food, that's a big issue. Get that fixed right away. But most people aren't there anymore. Right. They're dealing with these other issues related to the way they see themselves, the way they see other people. If you can work out all the forgiveness lessons there, forgiving yourself, forgiving others, you're clear to open your heart.
Right. Yeah, the opening of the heart. So the heart chakra is the 4th chakra.
Yep.
And its color is green.
Yep.
And it's actually, one of my teachers, Babaji Maharaj, has said that the heart chakra is the main chakra. And he actually said that all other chakras are technically within the heart chakra, meaning the heart is the one and all the rest are within it, in a sense. And I don't. Well, anyway, I don't want
The Law of One uses the term springboard. The heart is the springboard towards infinite intelligence. So if you can really get the heart open, then that's like basically what you need to go anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, and so opening the heart is, I mean, look, we live in America, and it's 2019, and our social construction is all over the map, and people are angry, especially politically and all this stuff, and it's, opening the heart almost seems scary, right? Like,
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I probably struggled a lot with, being programmed that I have to be a certain way. I have to be cool. I have to be a certain type of person, and the loving person isn't as cool. It's like there's these weird things that we've dealt with. Yeah, but really, when your heart is open, you're free to not hold any attachments. You're free to live life without getting stuck to the things which could hold you down, hold you back. So it's and it's really fulfilling too if you can stay in that space. But like you said, there are so many things this world is throwing at us that make it so hard to stay in that loving consciousness.
Right.
But that's all useful. It's all there for us to recognize. I'd rather have love than this right now.
Right. And I think they ask Ra how to get from third to fourth density, right? I think what does he say? Or it, whatever.
Well, it's like I described.
Okay.
Well, I mean, there's I guess you could say there's two ways. There's the natural harvesting that happens when the Earth reaches a point where everyone is going through some kind of transition, and that's what's happening right now. And this could there's a lot of things that could be manifesting in terms of maybe the sun will release some kind of extra energy, like a solar flash, a CME, and maybe the extraterrestrials will have to, very positive-oriented extraterrestrials will be involved in assisting humanity if our satellites all go out and our technology all goes out. That's something Corey Goode has been saying. It's not something that's talked about in the Law of One, but that's something that's been being speculated. It could be what the Law of One describes as the harvest, which is also the word Jesus used when he talked about in Matthew, I think it was chapter 16, he talked about that there was a parable that the wheat and the tares would be growing together, and the harvesters were told, don't pull out those weeds, don't try to get all the negative stuff out, because you might uproot the good weeds along with the good wheat along with the good weed, the bad weeds. Right. So basically, at the end of the age, now it's the appropriate time to do some of the separation, because now is the time that we don't need to have this field growing anymore. Now is the time that we can move on. And for a lot of people on Earth, move on will mean stay on Earth and go into the higher vibrational energy. It might mean some people will go to a different planet to have an experience similar to what they had here, to continue that same experience. And for some people, it might mean something totally different. But I don't totally know. It's just at this point, the harvesting is going to happen automatically. You just have to be a loving person in order to get to fourth density. Be a nice person and focus on forgiveness, and that's really the key. However, there are other esoteric things described that at anytime we want, we can open up all of our energy centers and be like Jesus, and we can be like gods on Earth if we are fully ready to see everything in terms of the sacramental nature of each experience and transcend the need for any sense of duality. We are the creator, and we have the power that goes with it, but we are choosing an experience of separate identity, which necessitates limitations.
Right. So we're accepting that in this incarnation. And so what do you think? Do you think that each of us could progress much faster and open up and get all the energy, like you said, or is it better to go through just the regular experiences that we sort of mapped out for ourselves already?
Well, I think at this point, the most practical thing is if you're a kind of person who's still getting frustrated during the day, just focus on love and forgiveness and keep that your priority. But if you feel like you can't remember the last time you got frustrated, if you're there, maybe it would be time to try a lot more meditation and see what you open up with that meditation, and see if you're ready for something more. But yeah, I'm not there yet. I don't know. This is from my interpretation of the law of one.
Right.
One of the things that they do describe is that there could be an imbalance between the higher energy centers. If you're trying really hard, if you're using psychedelics or drugs or something a lot, and you're opening up these higher energy centers in a way that's you haven't worked on your lower ones first, this is not a dependable kind of opening of your energy. And you might have a lot of amazing experiences, but it might not be useful for you in the long run. It might not be useful for other people. So staying very balanced is really, really important.
Right.
And making sure your lower centers are clear. The way you see yourself, the way you see other people is completely loving and forgiving. That's the important step first.
Right. Yeah. And in the ones I read last night, the sessions I read last night, they talked about a few individuals from history and what was their incarnation like. Did they move on to fourth density or did they grow? And surprisingly, Ra sometimes says that they overcame some things, but in general, they're not closer to the next level. So how? Well, I guess you just answered it with the forgiveness and the acceptance. That's how we move to the fourth. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds too simple for people, doesn't it? It's like, oh, I've heard this a million times. Well, there's a reason you've heard it a million times. Somebody's trying to get through to you.
Right. Yeah. And really accomplishing it for yourself in your life, or not even accomplishing it, becoming it yourself. That's the beauty of the spiritual journey, I think. Part of the beauty is it's just me. Like it doesn't matter about society. It doesn't matter about my job or where I live. Like it's just me. It's inside of me, right?
Yeah.
It's like, people love to watch games and football and online games and chess and all these games, but it's like within ourselves, progressing spiritually is sort of like a game which we could focus on.
Yeah. Yeah. I've thought of it a lot like a video game. It's like there's, I spent too much time distracted by video games as a kid. And if someone had told me, you can have superpowers if you work on it.
Right. I
remember when I was a kid after watching Star Wars, it's like, can I actually do that? Can I use the Force? I guess not. But if somebody like authoritatively told me as a kid, all the miracles Jesus did, that's available. There's no reason we can't get there. It's just you can't be super distracted. And this is something that actually is explicitly discussed. Like television is a huge thing for people. It's like so easy to get sucked into other people's experiences and not process your own. But we're given so many experiences that we don't fully properly process. One of the techniques they gave, and they give other examples of non-competitive games. Like if you're out doing something with other people, then there's lessons that you can be learning because of the interaction with other people. But ultimately, one of the lessons that's very helpful that they explained, one of the techniques is when you're thinking about the experiences you've had during the day, say you're meditating or just contemplating what happened to me, what triggered me, what was difficult today, you can try to imagine the opposite emotions of those emotions that you were experiencing. And if you can get to the point of imagining the opposite emotion, you can bring balance way quicker and easier to that particular type of emotion, positive or negative. You can balance out all of the emotions which are causing you to have karma and to continue in these types of experiences. And if we spend our time in the evenings working on ourselves instead of watching TV, we can blast through a lot of this stuff a lot easier. We do have the time if we can meditate in the evenings.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I feel that too. I felt it in my life. That's been my experience.
Yeah.
When I started practicing spirituality seriously and giving myself that time and doing these core simple practices,
yeah,
it literally cleaned up my whole life. I mean, it took several years to unfold, but it just cleared it up.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff we can clean.
So back to the positive and negative. Let's get there finally, because I've heard, and I think I've read in the Raw Contact as well, that I think we can all look around in life and understand that a lot of people are selfish, and I myself am probably selfish. right? I'm not
Yeah,
different than
in
anybody.
all types of little ways, we have our little...
Right. So, but to get to the next density, we either have to be, and tell me if I'm right, we either have to be 51%. Well, wait, no. What is the 51% and 51%?
Well, it's basically saying have your heart open most of the time, 51% plus of the time, and you're ready. You're ready for the next density.
And when my heart's open, that means I'm helping others or living?
Service to others versus service to self. And that's is a very strong terminology in the New Age community that seems to be evolving. Is, are you service to others now? Well, I prefer the term "Are you of service to others" to make it clear what they're talking about. Are you trying to be of service to others? That would indicate that your heart is open. You don't have to be fulfilling or actually clearly being of service. It's having that intention, having that heart opening. I want to be of service to others most of the time, and then you're not stuck in some distorted conception of yourself, because you have this awareness. Love is like an intuitive knowing, I would say, that I am one with my brother. I am one with you, and I'm going to do what's good for you. I'm not thinking of myself first. I'm thinking of you because we're a part of this together. And so the negative polarity...
well, wait, before we get there. The positive polarity, the 51% trying to be of service to others 51% of the time. I really like what you just said about you don't have to be out in the world doing things, like physically helping others, although sometimes I'm sure you would. But it's more of like a consciousness and a decision almost.
Yeah.
To be of service to others. And so I love that, because that really underscores this part of the spiritual journey, is that it really comes down to your own vibration and your own intentions, and not just am I out there, feeding homeless people or doing something like that.
Right. Another way I like to think of it, another phrasing I've liked is, where are you coming from when you're deciding what you're doing and why you're doing it? Where are you coming from? Are you coming from a desire to achieve something for yourself, or is that not a part of it? So that's another way.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the whole thing with valuing for yourself the fact that you're open to helping others. Like, again, not physically helping others, but being open and ready to help others. That's valuable. Like that's being in that state is valuable, but like we don't think of it that way, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Because then
we're in habits.
We're in habits. So because if you're in that state, things are going to come along. Like I think it's from a sales training course I once took. He's like, they said, don't go out prospecting, meaning don't go out looking for someone to sell to. So the quote was, don't go out prospecting, prospect wherever you go.
Wow. Yeah.
Because you know what? Like, so in terms of helping people as part of your spiritual evolution, don't go out specifically to help people. Just help people wherever you are and wherever you go.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of times there's kind of like a carrot on the stick mentality with, I want to be helping people because I want to be a good person, and being a good person will help me evolve. And, there's still this gray area where you're wanting it for yourself. But although, of course, one can easily lead to the other when you get out there with people. Oh, I feel so much love for these people now. Right. And that did happen to me when I was helping homeless people in Southern California. I was so overwhelmed with compassion that I hadn't felt for people before. So that can be one catalyst. I don't know. Should we move on to the negative? To the negative. Because this is, for the intellectual person, this is very useful. This can be very useful teaching to understand. Like, God does allow suffering, and there's a reason. God, it's of course your conception of God. It's like suffering might be an illusion based on the way we're thinking about it. So that might not be an accurate way of saying it either. But basically, there was an experiment that was described in the Law of One that the mind of the galaxy performed, and it's the same thing. They say is essentially made as a metaphor by talking about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That there was this kind of moment in the course of evolution of the galaxy that there was a decision: we will actually allow people more free will by limiting their awareness. And by limiting their awareness, they can become the idea of gods to themselves and decide this is good, this is evil. And in saying this is good and this is evil, and believing that, and basically having a limited access to an awareness of I am one with my brother, you can then create what we now call the negative. You could have somebody doing something that would be like a violent thing or taking from someone. You can have all types of conquest and power over other selves, and you can have one person feel like they're better than another person, even though they're all the creator. So with this kind of a scenario, now we have more catalyst. There's more opportunity for people to feel like it's more important to really do something about the state of the universe, really evolve and grow in love so that they can do something about these negative guys. And without this duality system, apparently there was much slower growth in the early stages of the universe and galactic evolution. But now that we have this extra catalyst from people who are really negative, and this is something that there's no shame in looking at it this way. There are some really, really negative people who are very, very self-oriented. And if you gave them, a chance to get better, they would choose to stay as evil as they want to be, because this is a legitimate choice. And it's easier to forgive people actually when you recognize this is actually a legitimate path. People can choose if they want to be very negative and evil. And so I do think that, and they actually describe there's like a whole galactic war kind of scale to this, where you've got, they call them the Orion group. They don't explicitly call them reptilian, but generally, people in the UFO community are saying these are reptilian guys or reptilian entities that work both physically and metaphysically in the inner dimensions, in the unseen dimensions. They can affect our minds. There can be minions that they work with that are entities that try to give us temptations towards self-aggrandizement, temptations towards selfishness of all kinds. And so there is this quarantine of the catalyst that basically there's like the higher density beings are allowing in a certain amount of negative influence into the planet based on our level of invitation of it. So the negative influence in the planet allows us to continue to pursue the negative if that's what we're wanting to pursue, and get more negative thoughts from these negative entities. So when we're frustrated, we might have a thought randomly come to us, oh, I hate that guy, and that might not actually be our thought. That might be something that of course, we're all one, but this is something that it's like it's coming from a different part of ourselves that's a very, very deeply and sophisticatedly negative part of ourselves that understands the negative so well that they know how to give you exactly that thought to get under your skin and to keep getting under your skin to give you the most intense catalyst possible. And so now you have to make a choice. Do you want to go down that road more, or do you want to truly understand the forgiveness that was missing that wouldn't have allowed that to happen in your mind? But basically they say that we are on a planet where there are some really negative people. You could call them the negative elite. And some of them are doing a lot of black magic. And this is a lot of literature in the conspiracy community about this kind of thing going on. And so they've maintained control of a lot of systems on this planet through darker techniques, and it's allowed us to experience catalysts on a very large scale, like political level scale and religion level scale. Holy wars and all the wars we fought have been heavily manipulated into being by false flags and stuff like that. So without going too far into all that, they say that there's a way to be harvested into the negative polarity from this planet if you choose to be 95% service to self and less than 5% service to others oriented. And this is a way that you could circumvent the heart chakra entirely by developing so much power in your lower chakras that you can jump up and create an energy system that's complete without the heart. And this is one way that people can, and they give examples like Genghis Khan and Rasputin were examples of people who are so negative that they were able to just flip out when they died and go to some totally other planet where it's based in conquest, it's based in warfare is the nature of those civilizations, which is basically, they say it's like 1/10 of the galaxy. So they're outnumbered, and It might be dwindling. There might have to be some kind of larger balancing taking place in the galaxy. I don't know for sure, but it's a part of our reality. And this is only the negative polarities can only exist in third, fourth, and fifth density. And in the sixth density, when you start to actually pursue the oneness of all things and see yourself, and you're gaining in power still, you're gaining in control, and that's what they want. But to gain in power in the sixth density, the only option is to see the oneness of all things. And so once they're in that level, only positivity can exist. So you flip polarity at some point in the early sixth density when you're pursuing very strongly negatively. So inevitably, everything is still reconciled. It's just for this portion of our evolution where we perceive ourselves as separate, we have this duality.
Right. And the duality, the negative elements help provide those experiences, the catalysts to help each of us grow ourselves.
Yeah.
Now, so in terms of the harvest, there's tell me if I'm right. There's two ways. One, you can be 51% service to others.
Yep.
Or the other way, you can be less than 5% service to others.
Right.
Okay. And then you're harvested. And could you describe the harvesting?
Yeah, it's a tricky word. People don't like that word. They also use the word, I think, graduation, and some people use the word ascension, and that's not explicitly in the Law of One, but it's clearly what's being referred to as the way people use that word. And it's not like we're being treated like we're some kind of weeds in a field, but it's like, I think, when you think about different densities and how do we actually view the different densities, one example I thought of is like a pet. Like the difference between the fourth density consciousnesses, which are super psychic and super conscious, those intelligences might look at people on the same way that we might look at a very intelligent, very beloved pet. We see them as part of the family, and we know that they don't quite understand enough to be let out to run down the street. So we there are some safeguards that we allow to be in place. We don't let them run down the street. Now, maybe if we're really determined, they do let some of us run down the street as long as we want, because there's always exceptions. But a lot of us, we don't want to go get run over by a car, and we want to have a nice experience. And so there is an experience here where we're becoming more intelligent, more spiritually aware, just like a pet might become more self-aware, more like a person of the family. And pets actually do, they say, eventually become ready to incarnate as people. So you could actually, I don't know if this could happen, but in theory, you could have a pet die and show up as a baby. Now, that baby wouldn't be very advanced. It might not be the most, it might not be a savant, but it's still getting to experience the beginnings of third density. Right. And in the same way, people here who become very loving get to, once they're really ready, these consciousnesses which have been guiding us to get to this point of being ready, they say, okay, they're ready for this new experience. And they might help our soul transition to a more ascended kind of existence.
Right.
And that's what's happening.
And so there's my personal, like for me personally, let's say I'm in third density and I want to move to fourth density. That's one transition for me personally. But then there's a transition for the planet as well. And do those two coincide?
For a lot of people, they will. And for maybe a lot of people, they won't.
Okay.
So there's something that happens with the whole galaxy that there are systems of energy, like a clock, they say. It's actually just as the sun moves around, as the cluster of star systems that we're in moves around the galaxy, there are different fields of energy that we'll be entering into. And these different fields of energy inevitably cause the sun to give off more energy that will require an upgraded body to fully deal with. And we might be getting those upgrades right now in a very subtle way. Maybe small genetic changes are being made behind the scenes. We don't always understand it. But with these upgraded bodies, we will be able to be more telepathic. And I do think it is actually partly, it's partly a spiritual thing, but it's partly a genetic thing. Like some people Like, I don't know if it's like Ireland. There's Native American, Cherokee. Like they're more psychic. It's I think it's been shown in many experiments that some types of genetics have more abilities, but we can have way more abilities when the energy is boosted and we're ready for it.
I see.
A lot of people want to have private thoughts, and it's not a bad thing.
Right.
But when you're in these higher energies, you have the ability to see other people's minds, and it's not going to feel like you can have a private thought anymore. And so some people don't want that, and that's fine.
Right.
But that's where love will take you. It's like, why wouldn't I want to know? Why wouldn't we want to share all of our thoughts?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so the planet will move into a new energy, which is going to help facilitate the movement of individuals to the fourth density. But of course, then it's up to me and my experience to sort of earn fourth density. Whatever.
Decide, make the choice that love is what you prefer.
Right. And then, so on the planet Earth right now, are there beings, are there physical beings that are in fourth density and fifth and sixth?
Well, maybe not visible, not generally visible. Maybe some beings show up in UFOs, and they're from fourth and fifth densities.
Okay. But no, like physical guys like you and me.
Right. It's not happening yet.
Are any of us fourth density or fifth? Or
no.
Okay.
Not yet. Although they do describe dual bodies that I don't fully understand that. There could be some people who have some of the genetics that are partly fourth density ready. And well, there's other caveats here. Maybe there are some beings that I don't know about. Maybe they're in some temples in Nepal or something.
Right. Well, the double body thing. Last night I read about Abraham Lincoln, that Ross said that in, I think it was 1853 or 1854, which was whatever, let's say 7 years before, or 7 or 8 years before the Civil War, that Abraham Lincoln had a dream, and there was some other being, I don't know if it was fourth or fifth or sixth density, basically took over his body and existence.
Yeah. This is a very rare phenomenon.
Okay.
But it's something that people can kind of agree to. I would say it might be partly before they're born too. There's pre-incarnative decisions that we make about how our life will play out such that we will grow the most. And maybe if the soul that Abraham Lincoln was representing felt like, my incarnation, I wanted to be a lot more useful right now, and I'm going to let this other being be a part of me. This is called a walk-in. So I don't know if the original Abraham Lincoln soul went somewhere, but basically they say that there was a wandering soul, like a lot of us are wandering souls from higher density, came into that incarnation to make Abraham Lincoln do a really tough job at a really critical time.
Right. Yeah, I think they said Lincoln's mind, body, spirit complex was like just waiting somewhere in the background while this other being used his body to do.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I forgot about that part.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And they said more about it, but I can't remember. So the wanderers who are here, and by the way, I just want to mention for everyone, I think we'll wrap this up pretty soon, but like we're talking about a lot of stuff here, but we could go into way more detail about what Ross says, and there's way more topics.
Yeah, it's like 1,000 things we talk about.
There's like there's history, the pyramids, everything. Like there's it's just astounding that I'm actually having to read it fairly slowly because
that's the best way to read it, as slow as you can to process everything.
Man. So the wanderers who are here, let's say they do come from, let's just say fifth density, but they're here in third density. So are they considered a third density being?
Well,
or like a 3 plus, like an iPhone.
We're all in all densities, and in some sense, all is one in time and space, and we're in all densities simultaneously. Actually, they say a higher self is ourselves coming back from the sixth density based on knowledge attained in the seventh density. And this higher self is able to come back in time across all of our existence and be with us in the present moment and assist us. So this is a trippy thing.
Yeah, that is. So in a sense, we're already there.
Yeah. It's just a matter of shifting the road that we're taking to get there. And there's many timelines that we can follow to get back to the one.
Yeah. I love this. So I was just staring off into space.
Yeah, that's a deep one. that could be a whole other discussion. That's huge.
Yeah, because I find myself thinking in practical terms. I keep coming back to, well, okay, so if my higher self is there in sixth density and there's just whatever, some forgetting, I'm forgetting things, or there's some veil, or there's blockages in my energy, like, let's just get rid of all that, man.
Yeah.
But the answer is simple, like we were talking about earlier, right? The answer is that simple, is it?
Yeah. Well, a lot of us will think that sounds simple, but then why are we holding on to all these things in our life? Like there are so many little reasons we make to ourselves. Well, I got to have this. I got to be like this. Well, I've got to help these other people because these other people don't matter. It's like, it's all these things we got to recognize. It's all kind of a jumbled mess of unforgiveness.
All right. Well, Mike Waskosky, let's talk about you. Tell us about your local meetup here in Colorado Springs and any speaking you'll be doing as well.
Okay, yeah. Well, this is I know Chris through meetup groups. Chris here has got his Pause Your Life meetup group, which I've attended in town with my wife for a while, and I started a meetup group called ET Disclosure and Contact in Colorado Springs here in 2015, and we meet a couple times a month. We do a meditation, monthly CE5, meditate under the stars, watch for ships. And we also do a monthly discussion, have very interesting people. Sometimes people who have a lot of insider information show up. It's so awesome when we do. And I also do another meetup group called Universal Metaphysics, where I do like everything besides the ET stuff. And so it's like if I have somebody in town wants to speak on something, I can give them a forum for that. And I work as a freelancer. I do web technologies. I do app development, web development. So there's a lot of different things I do. I work for people in the UFO community. So I've been trying to migrate what I'm doing to be more oriented towards what was being called disclosure, trying to get the truth out in as many forms as possible. And I'm happy that I'm able to do that more and more with my working hours. And so I'll be speaking at a conference in August called Dimensions of Disclosure. You can go to dimensionsofdisclosure.com. I'm probably going to talk about the Law of One, which I really love talking about a lot of different topics and interconnect that with other bigger things that are happening on the planet right now, and how all this relates to just removing distortions. The Law of One talks about everything as being a distortion of this one original thought, and seeing that everything is a distortion, and that there's a way to become less distorted in our understanding is really central to the process of evolution in mind, body, and spirit, I think.
Right.
So that's in Ventura, California, August 23rd to 25th, I think. I'll have David Wilcock and Corey Good there, Michael Sala, Laura Eisenhower. Pretty good, cool. Interesting people.
Awesome. And yeah, it's funny that we didn't bring up the word distortion until right at the very end.
Yeah.
Why don't you just define that real quick, just for everyone?
Well, I think it's the definition that you would think of. It's what is so interesting about it is that the definition you think of, it's just something that's not totally true, and it's the way we look at everything it's through a distorted lens.
Got it.
Of separate identity, of seeing things as not in the true light of the one original pure love and light that is the Creator.
Got it. And in the Law of One sort of philosophy, everything is a distortion.
Everything that we are experiencing, that we are thinking. Generally, I would say, well, I should say 100%, because it's like to get to that state of consciousness, it doesn't seem to be what I've done so far. But in theory, there's an undistorted thought that we're getting to.
Right. And all of this, even our physical bodies and the planet, like it's here for a reason. It's not that it's useless.
Yeah.
But it's not, it's sort of radiating the one thought of love.
Yeah.
But not properly.
Yeah, like the Course in Miracles would call it an illusion or unreal. And I think that's a great way to connect the two philosophies together, is that there's just a large distorted perception of what is, and it's ultimately an illusion from what really is.
Right. Yeah, the whole idea of illusion is really fascinating.
Yeah.
Because things are here. everything exists for a time, but then at some time it goes away.
Yeah.
Like a tree or anything, our bodies.
Yeah.
But there's one thing that never goes away.
Right. That which is eternal. And we're still seeking to understand.
Right.
Yeah. But love is definitely a connected concept. Love and light. Because they say love was the original, they call it the second distortion, but it's the original distortion that created infinite energy. The infinite awareness of the creator created an infinite energy, which was love. And so everything came from love. And so seeing love in the moment, seeking love in the moment gets us back to that original energy of oneness.
Right. Well, we got to leave on that note right there.
All right.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, this is great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Keep doing these.
Awesome. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, yeah. And you're going to have to, we're going to have to do a lot more of these, me and you, because
sure,
I find it fascinating.
Yeah.
And I love talking about it. And I think it'll help a lot of people too.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.